Hey, 42 here. Ghosts have been an intrinsic part of the human experience for as long as man has been keeling over dead, and that's a bloody long time. In Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, they are described as a vapour gibbering and whining into the earth. Interestingly, in Greek literature, ghosts or shades do not interact with humans or the living world in any way, as people often report they do so today. Though an annual feast was held in ancient Greece to honour the dead, in which it is believed that the spirits of the deceased attended for just one day. It wasn't until the Victorian era when spiritualism became a thing, and people began to postulate that perhaps spirits could reside on the human plane and interact with the living through mediums. In Victorian London, seances became the a la mode of society. It was fashionable for a gentleman or lady to spend their Saturday evenings trying to contact dead Aunt Edna. Though a Victorian seance was infamously wrought with deceitful tricks carried out by the medium hosting the event, it was common for artfully concealed wires to be attached to the seance table so that when the spirit got a little agitated, the medium could tug a string to rattle the table about or even lift it slightly into the air. In England alone, over the past 25 years, there have been over 1,000 reported incidents of a close encounter with a ghost or demon. Remarkably, this number has increased when compared to the preceding 25 years. England is one of the most apparently haunted countries in the world, and there are several notable old houses and buildings where every year numerous people report seeing ghostly figures, a cold shiver down their spine, and unexplained noises. To name just a couple, the ancient Ram Inn in Gloucestershire and Ham House in Richmond. Hampton Court Palace is supposedly haunted by the ghosts of Henry VIII and his youngest wife Catherine Howard. And Blicking Hall in Norfolk is haunted by the headless ghost of Anne Boleyn. And there are, of course, thousands of sightings or experiences of ghosts, mostly dead relatives, inside people's own homes all over the world each year. In America, it is illegal to sell a house without informing potential buyers if you believe it to be haunted. But many people, including myself, find all this very hard to believe, and think that all these ghost sightings are no more than a load of old ectoplasm, which by the way is just egg whites. So what happens to reported ghost interactions when they are put under scientific scrutiny? The answer may send shivers down your spine, although it probably won't. There are obvious explanations for minor paranormal experiences. For example, creaking floorboards are frequently caused by changes in humidity levels, and air pressure changes can cause doors to slam. Electronic devices can play up because of condensation in the air, or even particles from outer space, such as neutrinos, which can interfere with circuitry. But what about more visceral experiences, such as when people report actually seeing a face or wispy figure standing directly in front of them in the dead of the night? Well, there are a few scientific explanations that can shed some rational light on most of these supernatural shades. Bizarrely, ghost sightings can be caused by faulty central heating. Toxicologists have warned that exposure to carbon monoxide and household pesticides can cause hallucinations. When carbon monoxide enters your body, it mixes with the hemoglobin in your bloodstream, which prevents you from being able to deliver blood to your vital organs. This can kill. But before death, sufferers will experience dizziness, confusion, and hallucinations. There are numerous reports of people seeing ghosts in their homes only to later have their central heating checked and discovered that they had a carbon monoxide leak. It's thought that the rampant reports of supernatural shades throughout the Victorian era could be a result of the heavy use of gas lamps, and thus carbon monoxide poisoning was far more common. One should also bear in mind that toxic poisoning is far more common in older houses where ghost sightings are typically reported because such buildings have very poor ventilation. Many people report seeing ghosts and demons during their sleep. But many such cases can be attributed to a particularly terrifying mental phenomenon called sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when you suddenly wake up in the middle of the night, but you are unable to move no matter how hard you try. Your mind is wide awake, but your body is still asleep. Around 10% of people will experience sleep paralysis during their lifetime, and 5% of people suffer from it on a regular basis. Most people who experience a bout of sleep paralysis report feeling fear, dread, and impending doom. But they also report disturbing hallucinations that feel visceral and real at the time. Many see demons standing at the foot of their bed. Some people see ghostly figures in the corner of the room. Sometimes these apparitions even attack the sufferer, most commonly by strangulation. It's incredibly common for sufferers to see members of their family or a friend, but their face is distorted, twisted, or even replaced with that of some grotesque monster from the pits of hell. All this whilst the sufferer is unable to move even their fingertips and has to endure the horrendous episode. Sleep paralysis has been reported and documented all throughout history. It's believed to be the primary explanation for many alien abduction stories and sightings of ghosts during the night. But what about those spooky wake time apparitions? Well, perhaps it's all in the vibrations. In the 80s, British engineer Vic Tandy was working in his research lab on his own in the evenings. He reported that night after night he would have these really unsettling feelings in the lab. In his own words, "I was sweating but cold, and the feeling of depression was noticeable. But there was also something else. It was as though something was in the room with me." He also reported seeing spirits in his peripheral vision, but every time he turned around, there was nothing there. Tandy was spooked, but as a scientist and a paranormal skeptic, he found his experience hard to believe at face value. He investigated, but couldn't discern any rational explanation for the spooky happenings. Until one day he was using a vise in his lab to polish his fencing foil, as we all do from time to time. He noticed that even when clamped in a vise and not touching it, the foil was rapidly vibrating. He followed the vibrations and found that the source was a recently installed extractor fan right next to the location where he had experienced the ghostly sightings. The extractor fan was emitting ultrasound at 19 Hz. It has always been well documented that frequencies around this range can cause feelings of fear, depression, and cold shivers in humans. Vic Tandy, however, was the first person to discover that such frequencies can also cause paranormal sensations. This works because frequencies that resonate below 20 Hz physically vibrate your eyeball, which is an odd thought, and can cause your vision to distort. So, if you see a ghost, perhaps check that your toaster isn't malfunctioning. But the depressingly boring truth about most ghost sightings is that the vast majority are probably just another case of plain old pareidolia. Have you ever popped your morning toast out of the toaster to see the face of Jesus Christ himself staring back at you? Because if Jesus were to make a second coming, it would obviously be in the form of a wheat-based morning snack. Then you have just experienced pareidolia, the tendency for people to see shapes, especially faces, in random patterns and objects. For a long time, it was thought that pareidolia was a symptom of psychosis, but it has since been recognised as an entirely normal human tendency which almost everyone experiences. It's why we see faces in clouds, it's why we hear hidden messages in music or random noise, and it's why you saw Satan himself in your porridge this morning. The human brain has evolved to recognise faces extremely quickly, because by quickly identifying a face and whether or not it seems welcoming or angry, humans can quickly determine whether or not they should run away from it. We can identify whether or not an object is or is not a face in 130 milliseconds on average, far quicker than how fast we can determine that a tree is a tree. Our brain wants to see faces everywhere. It's why basic character-based emoticons such as a colon and parenthesis are universally recognised as a face. We even derive emotion from it. The byproduct of this neural superpower is that humans very often identify random patterns as faces, and the world is full of an almost infinite number of random patterns. Therefore, the likelihood of one seeing a ghostly face in a piece of wood or the ruffles of a curtain are surprisingly high. And then, of course, there is the power of good old-fashioned suggestion. A well-known study in the 90s concluded that the mere suggestion of a place being haunted is enough to induce sensations of poltergeist behaviour. 22 participants were led through an old theatre at night. 11 were told it was haunted, and the other 11 were simply told it was undergoing renovation. Those who were told it was haunted beforehand reported experiencing paranormal events. They heard more bumps in the night, creaking floorboards, gusts of cold air, and mysterious shapes and faces in the dark corners of the theatre. The other 11 participants experienced no such happenings. Joe Nickell is the world's only full-time paranormal investigator. He has written 40 books debunking the full spectrum of paranormal phenomena. He spends his life using a whole menagerie of analytical techniques from toxicology to blood spatter analysis to logically investigate people's reports of paranormal experiences. And over several decades and hundreds of cases, Nickell says he has never found one single case that has ever provided a shred of real evidence to validate the existence of ghosts, or any other supernatural entities for that matter. Some psychologists believe that our minds manifest ghosts in our field of vision after we lose a loved one, as seeing their face is comforting and aids the grieving process, which explains why so many ghost apparitions are of loved ones that we've lost. If this is true, then it makes for a rather nice explanation to an age-old phenomenon and a part of the human experience that we may never fully understand. Thank you for watching. I've recently launched my first book, which I'm crowdfunding through Unbound Publishing. It's called Stick a Flag in It, 1,000 Years of Bizarre History from Britain and Beyond. If you want to get your hands on a first edition signed copy, then head on over to Unbound, the link's in the description. Check out the launch video over there if you haven't already, and pledge today. Thank you.